Ballet originated as early as the 15th century in European countries such as Italy, France, and Russia. It was created by European choreographers for European audiences, and thereby by white choreographers for white audiences. Its refusal to change with the times has caused it to remain in the past. From the use of black and yellow face to the lack of diversity in major dance companies, the condescending nature of classical ballet as a whole underlines its refusal to embrace dancers of all ethnicities. Even in December 2019, when the fight against racial injustice was widespread, Misty Copeland reposted a picture on Instagram of two dancers from the Bolshoi Ballet performing La Bayadere in blackface. These issues have met surprising pushback from dancers, artistic directors, and staff members. Anna Okuneva, a company member in Moscow, says, "I've smeared my face and body with stain 1,000 times. This is my creative work, and this is not racism." Although bold examples like this one are more common in Europe than in the Americas, microaggressions such as pale-colored tights and typecasting are prevalent through all of ballet. The toxic culture of ballet, usually hidden behind the scenes, is obvious in many classical ballets, including the Nutcracker. Most ballet companies present the Nutcracker each year, and although it is beloved by many, it is one of the most controversial ballets because of its racist undertones. Though rooted in tradition, the Nutcracker's misappropriation of cultures and frequent miscasting of dancers result in an indisputably racist performance. Dance is a language as much as it is an art form. Being able to communicate with the audience through movement is the goal of the artist. However, communication of cultures cannot exist while stereotyping and false portrayals remain in performances. The classic Nutcracker story by E.T.A. Hoffmann, later composed by Pyotr Tchaikovsky and set as a ballet by Maurice Petipa in 1892, follows Clara as she receives the Nutcracker for Christmas. In the second act, where divertissements, translated from French as entertainments, from around the world perform for Clara and the Nutcracker, stylizations disregard the cultural values the dances arise from and instead focus on entertaining the European guests in the land of sweets. While we do not know the exact reason Tchaikovsky chose to include Arabian, Chinese, and Spanish cultures in the second act of the Nutcracker, we do know that they were not in the original book that the ballet was based upon. One can reason that Tchaikovsky was inspired by the globalization around him. At the time, delicacies were strictly produced and imported from other countries, so Tchaikovsky followed confections like tea and coffee from China and the Arabian Peninsula, as well as the travel of chocolate from the Americas to Spain. The Nutcracker's Chinese tea is the divertissement most negatively stereotypical. The choreography, facial expressions, and costumes tell a story of Asian caricatures. It is the only piece costume designers change a dancer's ethnicity in the form of yellowface, where a dancer will infuse their makeup with saffron powder to add a yellow tinge to imitate East Asian ethnicities. Dancers wear geisha wigs with chopsticks woven in, despite this hairstyle never being used in Chinese culture. Finally, eyeliner can be used to slim a dancer's eyes to closely mimic an East Asian eye shape. From the moment the dancers enter the stage, they shuffle their feet and bob their heads. As the piece progresses, excessive bowing, as well as exaggerated facial expressions can be seen. Many dancers also hold up their two index fingers. The cartoonish display signifies to the audience that the company does not care about the accuracy of its performance, keeping the performance as outdated as its Eurocentric roots. While children of European descent can see themselves in almost all of the dances, Asian or Asian American children have no representation other than the racist stereotype of their culture.
Just seeing someone that you identify with on stage as a kid makes it feel safer and for you to enter that space.
When Petipa choreographed the ballet, he did not include these stereotypical portrayals.
A friend of ours, Doug Fullington, reconstructed the original choreography, and in it, it's actually there are no fingers, it's a very athletic sort of dance.
The costumes and stylizations evolved as Chinese porcelain production increased in the late 1800s. Artisans proved their expertise by creating delicate hands with extended index fingers, a challenging skill to master. Although this technique exhibited skill, it morphed into a derogatory gesture when Balanchine brought the ballet to the United States. Another point to note is that Tchaikovsky's ballet was unsuccessful when it first premiered in Russia, and the Nutcracker did not become popular until it reached the US. The Arabian dance, otherwise known as Kafi, is hypersexualized and focuses more on appropriating and exaggerating Islamic rituals instead of trade. A harem theme sees females passed from one male dancer to the next, sometimes summoned with a sharp clap, revealing costumes to show excessive amounts of skin for both the male and female dancers. Audience members receive the wrong message about the Middle East, an idea pulled and exaggerated from an incredible culture, rather than the realistic industry and art form of the Arabian Peninsula. Although this piece is often culturally demeaning, there are different approaches to the choreography and stylizations that make it less so.
The choreography, the way I approached it was not to make it sexual. And I know that there's a lot of angles and there's a lot of nuance in that. I tried to infuse it with a sense of sensuality, but not sexuality.
European divertissements, including Russian trepak or candy cane, and the Spanish chocolate piece, are more accurate compared to the pieces from China and the Middle East. The Spanish dance includes historically correct steps from classical Spanish dances, along with costumes inspired by flamenco dresswear, many adorned with a rose. Dancers cast in trepak also wear traditional costumes and do authentic steps from Russian dances. Arabian and Chinese tea are the only dances not based on genuine cultural dance steps.
We don't think that Nutcracker should just be canceled. Like that, I think there's a way to adapt Nutcracker. I think there's more value in its teaching capacity as a ballet. For a lot of children who don't live in New York or LA, this is their first exposure to culture, is going to see the regional production of Nutcracker.
In recent years, some companies are combating the cultural appropriations of the Nutcracker. In 2017, New York City Ballet's recreation of the ballet inspired the pledge known as the Final Bow for Yellowface, which intends to raise awareness of the racist issues within the Nutcracker. Many companies have signed it, agreeing to make their interpretation of the Nutcracker inclusive and culturally accurate. Choreographer Helgi Tomasson modernized San Francisco Ballet's Nutcracker by taking inspiration from the World Fair held in San Francisco in 1915. The company based its divertissements on cultures showcased at the fair, and their Chinese dance is based on the city's Chinatown. This version uses dragons and culturally accurate costumes to pay homage to Chinese American history.
But the conversation is still ongoing. I can speak for Boston Ballet specifically. They put together a committee that's steering the company rather in or helping them to make decisions in how to further diversify. And I know that we aren't the only company that is still having this conversation.
As ballet is a traditional art form rooted in centuries of Eurocentric ideologies, it has taken a long time to realize and acknowledge its racist connotations. The lengthy history of the Nutcracker and Balanchine's cherished choreography causes the ballet to be one of the most resistant to change. Companies are dedicated to preserving the history of the ballet rather than catering to the 21st century. However, the Black Lives Matter movement prevalent in the past few years helped move the classical ballet forward as a whole and combat cultural ignorance. The movement began to encourage major dancewear suppliers to produce more inclusive dance supplies such as tights and point shoes in larger ranges of color.
But I do want to make the point that these conversations have been happening, just they weren't amplified. And now, unfortunately, through, the death of George Floyd and so many others, this conversation is not going away.
In June of 2018, the Equity Project held its first meeting, with the goal to increase the presence of people of color in ballet and to provoke change that reflects diversity in all of its fullness and truthfully represents America both on stage and behind the scenes. The project educates companies on their historical racism and how to eliminate these issues moving forward. As more racial injustices have been realized in the past few years, the popular ballet has been modified, but it still has a long way to go. These steps are essential in order to make the Nutcracker an inclusive ballet that can be enjoyed by people of all backgrounds. If audiences continue to be alienated by controversial performances, classical ballet will cease to exist because of its inability to effectively communicate with its patrons.